Having recently rewatched the Konoha Crush arc, I couldn't help but reflect on how much I love Gaara as a character. Don't get me wrong, he's a killer, but my heart broke for him as I went over his history. He and Naruto weren't too different from one another. Both of them became living weapons for their village at the expense of their mother at birth. Both were feared and hated by their fellow villagers. The difference was that Gaara's father, Rasa, survived and was a heartless fellow, pushing Gaara to be the worst of the worst. Eventually, Gaara snapped and became the kind of character he was, with his heart only being healed by the love and kindness of Naruto, another Jinchuriki who experienced the same as Gaara. I always loved the dynamic between Naruto and Gaara, and so last video I knew I would need to build off of that. This time around, I've tweaked Rasa a little to make him less cold. Now let's see where this goes from here. Are you ready? Grab your headband and a snack and let's get into it. Welcome to the Amagi. Before we begin, only 25% of our viewers are subscribed, so if you're a fan of the video, please like and double check if you are subscribed. And with that out of the way, let's get into the video. The sound of war cries could be heard amongst the field of bodies. The earth was stained red with the blood of shinobi. The air was thick, warm, sticky. It smelled heavily of iron. The sight was ghastly. Looking upon the faces of those who had given their lives for the cause, one could only shake in fear. Naruto was among those on the field, wandering amidst the flames. He'd been brought to this place to experience a taste of war, to get acclimated to seeing it. That was what 3rd Hokage Hiruzen had said. But now that he was here, he couldn't find his way back. The shinobi that had been guarding and protecting him had been killed, and now Naruto was in the thick of it, alone. His training was barely holding him through. Currently, he had a bubble blower out. I know it seemed like an odd weapon to use on the battlefield, but right now Naruto was making use of Saiken's ability, the soap bubble ninjutsu. Saiken was a powerful user of water release, and with his techniques, Naruto found himself capable of hiding in plain sight more easily. He could use its abilities to create a fog to conceal himself, so right now he was trying to do just that. The battlefield was massive, and he wanted to use his fog to conceal everyone in hopes that it would protect more people, naively thinking that perhaps it might cause both sides to call off the battle and pull back. Naruto had been through the ringer. He had been attacked. He'd lost his headband and forehead protector, and his clothes were in tatters. Naruto knew he couldn't stay out in the open like this. He needed to get to cover quickly. He rushed toward the nearby forest and passed into it. As he ran through the thick trees and thicker underbrush, he thought about the battle. Kusagakure was the site of the battlefield, with the Land of Grass having sided with Suna and the allied forces it led. In a way though, Naruto felt fortunate. The Land of Grass was teeming with trees, grass, and all manner of things he could use for cover. All manner of things he could use to survive. Having gotten into the forest, out of the open, Naruto stopped for a moment to check his wounds. He had a deep cut running over his lower ribs that terminated just below them. Looking at it, he could already see where it was healing, likely due to his tailed beasts within him donating some chakra to heal him. Naruto's leg had taken wounds, and he was pretty sure he had some shrapnel from a nearby explosion lodged in his shoulder. He'd seen better days. It seemed that the bleeding had mostly stopped now, but the wounds still hurt, and Naruto wanted to be careful about how he moved to ensure he didn't reopen any. As he sat there, he thought he heard the sound of shinobi following behind. He made a mad dash to escape, and as he ran, his tired body began to catch up with him. He needed to find a place to rest that others either couldn't or wouldn't think to follow him. As he looked around, he saw an open hole made from stone, a cave entrance. Naruto ducked inside. He waited by a large stone at the opening and heard the shinobi's footsteps draw close before drifting off into the distance. He was safe, for now. He stood and began to make his way deeper into the cave. Maybe he could just wait the battle out. As he made his way through the cave though, he thought he heard something a little deeper. Fear seized his body. He hadn't realized yet that it was very possible he was not alone in this cave. He could be sharing it. Pulling a kunai from his holster, he moved deeper, seeking whatever made that sound. He would probably have to kill them. He hoped not, but it was a good possibility. Naruto rounded a corner and saw a shadow there. He almost panicked, but he didn't. He kept it together and drew closer. He realized that the being wasn't moving, but laying on the ground. Utilizing fire ninjutsu to light the area, he found another boy about the same age as Naruto. He was hurt pretty badly. It seemed he had multiple stab wounds. The boy was just laying there, clutching his wounds, his labored breath telling Naruto just how weak he was. Naruto couldn't find a forehead protector, so he elected to believe that this boy was a Konoha shinobi. He grabbed his first aid kit. In truth, Naruto had been hoping to enter this cave and use his first aid kit to deal with his own wounds, but Naruto looked at his and saw that they were mostly healed. Looking at this boy, he knew that his wounds were far worse. So Naruto began treating the boy. He opened his first aid kit and began the process of tending to the boy's wounds. The first thing Naruto did was pour alcohol into the boy's wounds. The boy let out a gasp and gripped tightly onto Naruto's jacket. "I know it hurts, but just be strong. It'll only last a little while." Once that was done, Naruto wrapped the boy up completely. As he did this, the boy was awfully silent. Naruto began to fear that the boy had died, but upon checking for a pulse, Naruto found one. Relieved, he let out a sigh. As far as Naruto could tell, the boy seemed stable. There wasn't much more that he could do besides that. He would keep an eye out for any hostiles that might have entered the cave. Here he waited for quite some time. Eventually, after a couple of hours, the boy woke up. His eyes opened and he felt softness below his head. His hand began slowly pulling up his body, checking his wounds, only to find them already bandaged. He struggled to sit up, but was overtaken by sudden agony. "Don't move too quick. You've been hurt." The boy lay back. "What happened?" he asked. Naruto began to reply. "I don't know. I was wounded and I came in here to protect myself, and I found you, and you were in even worse shape, so I applied first aid." The boy looked down at his properly cared for wounds. He looked to Naruto. "Thank you so much. I loathe to think what might have happened if you didn't show up when you did." Naruto waved it off. "No biggie. I'm just glad to see that you're okay." The boy, in return, fumbled around his own supplies and pulled out a pair of MREs. He handed one to Naruto. Naruto looked at it. "Oh no, I can't take this. You need this way more." The boy shook his head. "You're hurt too. You need to eat. After you do, I'll wrap your wounds too." Naruto thought about it for a moment and then nodded. He opened up the meal, said a blessing, and prepared to eat. After this, the other boy had Naruto lift his shirt so he could properly treat the wound over his ribs. It hurt indeed, especially as the boy began to do the same things Naruto had done earlier, but as time passed, Naruto felt some relief in his ribs, his leg, and his shoulder. The boy finished wrapping up his leg and slowly pulled back, checking his work. Naruto looked down. It was expertly cared for, even better than Naruto had cared for the boy. "Wow, that's impressive," Naruto said. He looked up at him. "What's your name, by the way?" The boy smiled. "My name's Gaara." Naruto nodded. "Nice name. Mine's Naruto." Gaara extended his hand to Naruto for a handshake. Naruto took it. He looked around. "How long have you been here, Gaara?" Gaara shrugged. "I don't know. I got wounded and just wandered in here. The sun was out, so I'm not sure. Maybe a couple minutes before you, maybe hours?" "Well, you were sleeping for about 2 hours before you came to. I'm just glad you came to at all. Your wounds were pretty bad. But it looks like the worst is behind you. I disinfected your wounds, so that should hopefully stave off infection." Gaara looked at his wrapped wounds again. He offered a slight bow of respect. "Thank you so much." Naruto offered a smile. He then stood. Gaara watched him. "Where are you going?" Naruto looked back at him. "I'm gonna go take a peek outside. The battle was hot about 2 hours ago. I wonder if it's moved." Naruto made his way outside of the cave. By this time, the fog he had created was gone, but it was now replaced with a new, lighter fog. Naruto didn't hear anything. No, wait. He did. He did hear something. He heard the sound of distant fighting, probably no less than 2 miles away. The sound of explosions could be heard, muffled by distance. "I think we're safe now. We need to meet up with our side. Then we can get actual medical attention." Gaara nodded. He and Naruto began to make their way through the forest again in the direction that Naruto had come from. As they walked, the rain was pouring down. The rain had knocked down on the humidity as well as the bloody stench, but it all remained. As they walked, Gaara spoke. "Tell me about yourself." Naruto looked back for a moment before looking forward again. "I was raised an orphan. At a very young age, my parents died and I was left alone. I was afforded an apartment by the Kage. In return, I now serve as a part of the village's fighting forces." Gaara nodded. "I can sympathize. My mother died in childbirth. I've never known her. And sometimes I wonder if it's possible to miss people you never knew. But as my heart aches every time I see her picture, I know it's possible, because there's no other reason why my heart might hurt like this." Naruto stopped for a moment. He looked back. "I'm sorry for your loss." Gaara nodded. "I'm sorry too." They continued making their way off for a time and then stopped. "Last time I checked, friendly battle lines were in that direction," Naruto said as he pointed east. Gaara shook his head. "No, that's the enemy battle line. We gotta go west." Naruto looked back. "We can't go west. Enemy battle lines are west. It's easy to tell." "Oh, how?" Gaara asked. "Enemy battle lines are to the west because that's where Suna is, to the west." Gaara was quiet for a moment. "If we're going to Suna, then we need to go west, because Suna is where all our friends are." Naruto suddenly felt a heaviness come down upon the air. "Suna is your friend?" Gaara's eyes widened a little. "Konoha is not your enemy." There was a sudden silence. The two of them looked at each other with horror for a moment, not sure when the other would attack. Suddenly, Gaara pulled a kunai and rushed Naruto. Naruto pulled one as well, and just quick enough that he could defend himself. The two clashed and Naruto pushed Gaara back. Naruto had more strength than him. Despite his left shoulder and left calf having been damaged, his right arm and right leg still had strength, and with that strength he pushed back. His ribs might have been lacerated, but his abdominal muscles and pectorals were still in fairly good condition. Gaara was a bit different. He'd received stab wounds that had perforated many of his muscles and likely damaged organs. He was definitely in worse condition. Naruto was wondering how he could even be alive with the injuries he sustained. He chalked it up to divine intervention. Despite everything, Naruto was stronger, so in the midst of their struggle, he managed to push Gaara down against a tree. Gaara raised his hands with a squeal to protect himself. Naruto came down as to stab Gaara, but stopped short. He couldn't help it. He remembered how he had tended to this boy's wounds, how this boy had tended to his, and how they shared a meal together in the cave. Naruto remembered how they opened up to each other about their past, and how similar the two of them truly were. Naruto pulled the kunai back. He resheathed it. Gaara began to peek over his hands to see Naruto looking at him with compassion. He stood. "To be honest with you, I almost felt like we were becoming friends. I don't really want to kill you." Naruto extended his hand to Gaara. Gaara looked at it with skepticism. Naruto spoke. "I know we're different. I know we're from different villages, but I don't want this to be the end. I want you to go back to your village and I'll go back to mine. And let us pray that we never meet each other on the field of battle again. I don't want to fight you." Gaara, with a bit of trepidation in his heart, reached out and took Naruto's hand. Naruto helped him back to his feet. As he did, he couldn't help but notice that there was some blood on Gaara's bandages. "It looks like you're bleeding again," Naruto said. Gaara pointed to Naruto's side. "You too." Naruto looked down at his ribs. He sighed and smiled. "I guess that's why we gotta get back behind our own lines. Gotta get some help." Naruto smiled and waved kindly to the boy. He then turned around and began to walk away. Gaara called out to him, "Naruto." Naruto turned back. "What's up?" Gaara stood there for a moment. Do you think we'll ever see each other again?" Naruto thought about it and then smiled. "I'm certain we will." Gaara smiled, and then the two turned around and began to walk away. Naruto returned to his own lines where he was cared for by the various medical nin that were there. The same was true of Gaara, though he was forced into surgery early due to the more dangerous injuries he sustained. They would be allowed to return to their villages respectively to rest. As Gaara sat in his home, his body healing, he walked to the edge of the balcony overlooking Suna. In the distance, the sands of the desert could be seen, a chill wind blowing off of them. Kankuro, who had returned home for a leave, watched him. Gaara spoke. "Why are we fighting, Kankuro?" "What do you mean?" his brother asked. Gaara looked back. "What is the Third Shinobi World War about, anyway?" Kankuro thought back. "It all started when nations began prodding each other. Larger countries tried preying on weaker ones, and now here we are." Gaara thought about it. Which countries tried prodding? Kankuro shrugged. "All of them, I guess. Iwagakure started prodding the land of grass. Kumo started poking at the land of frost and the land of hot water. Konoha began to feel threatened and began to push back on them and eventually began assimilating smaller countries into itself." "What about us?" Gaara asked. Kankuro thought about it. "We got dragged into it by duty to allies." "But we also started taking land," Gaara asked. Kankuro waved his hand in a way to say, so. "Not technically," Kankuro said. "Konoha has conquered and press-ganged its enemies into war with us. We've made pacts and treaties with the nations nearby. We're part of a coalition of nations. We've simply been named as the head as a means to fight against Konoha due to our nation not being as worn out as the other countries." "Does that mean we're not the ones who decide if the war continues or not?" Gaara asked. Kankuro shook his head. "I didn't say that. We're right now the main meat of the war. Iwa knew that it could never win without us. Each of the little villages knew the same. If we signed a peace treaty with Konoha, the war would have to end. The other nations would have to sign one too, because if they didn't, there'd be no guarantee that they wouldn't be destroyed, so it would either be sign or die for them." Gaara looked out toward the rising moon. "Are we the good guys or the bad guys?" The moon was large, pale, and round. Naruto's eyes looked up at it from the balcony of his own apartment. He too was wrapped up, and his muscles felt raw. He considered the war. Why were they still fighting? Why did this still matter? He grabbed the jacket and slipped on a pair of shoes and stepped out into the night. As he walked down the streets, his mind was consumed with the thoughts of the war. What was it worth? Naruto was racking his brain, trying to think of anything, trying to understand the war, trying to understand why it continued. He had tried reading as much as he could about it and found that it really boiled down to a bunch of nations playing a big game of Agario with each other. Konoha had not planned to join the war until its borders began to be pushed, in which Konoha did some pushing back. By the end of it, Kumo and Kiri were both now a part of Konoha. This caused the Third Great Ninja War to develop into a massive game of Axis and allies, where two sides comprised of a multitude of different countries had been formed. But at this point, Naruto wondered if anything but fear was pushing them forward. Why not sue for peace? Naruto walked past the Hokage's residence when he looked up and saw the light on in the office. Naruto made his way to Hiruzen. He knocked on the door and heard the elderly man bid him to enter. Naruto opened the door. Hiruzen looked up from his table and smiled. "Hello, Naruto. Come in. Have a seat." Naruto walked in and sat down by the desk. "What can I do for you?" Hiruzen asked. Naruto thought about it for a while before speaking. Can you explain to me what the war is currently about? Hiruzen removed his glasses. The scene you saw was horrid, wasn't it? I'm sure you're feeling very upset about it, and that's a natural reaction when one sees so much death. Naruto shook his head. No, that's not it. Well, I mean, yeah, it is that, but only in one sense. When I was on the battlefield, I was wounded and on the run. My squad had been killed. I ran into a cave and met a young boy about my age who was wounded grievously. I began first aid, and when he woke, he tended to me as well, and we shared a meal. We talked and found out how much we had in common, and we began to rely on each other as we began to escape the battlefield. But as we escaped, it became apparent that I was a Konoha nin and he was Suna. This led to a confrontation, and I was forced to defend myself. Did you kill him? Hiruzen asked. Naruto shook his head. I couldn't bring myself to. It felt like he and I were almost friends. I let him return to his village's lines, and he let me return to mine. Before I left, though, I asked if he thought if we would ever see each other again. I wanted it to be a yes desperately, but with the war, that's impossible. Hiruzen nodded his head. Naruto continued. I suppose I wanted to know why we're still fighting, and if there's a way for us to stop. Hiruzen looked down as he clasped his hands together, interlocking his fingers. I can't tell you for certain that there's a way we can stop. But at this point, the war is about more than just conquest. It's about proving a point that you're not allowed to step on the Land of Fire's toes. The Land of Fire has a reputation to uphold. That's stupid, Naruto remarked. Hiruzen looked up at him for a moment before continuing. It may seem that way, but it's not. Our reputation is what protects us. If nations believe they can walk all over us, they will. It would lead to more conflicts like this in the end, so we have to fight back. We need to defeat the enemy or we'll seem weak, and perceived weakness is not good for the village or for its people. It was obvious that this answer didn't satisfy Naruto. Hiruzen then spoke again. Listen, Naruto. I too wish that I could just wave my hand and end the war. I wish I could sign a treaty, but I can't. The only way I could do such a thing is if we captured the enemy's tailed beasts. The 10 Tails Jinchuriki would be so powerful that Konoha would remain undisputed for generations. If we could do that, you would be free to have as much fun with your friend as you desire, but we first need to bring the tailed beasts under our control. If we could do that, then the war would end. Naruto nodded. Then it's a goal I'll be working towards. I'm gonna train my hardest to make it happen. Unbeknownst to Naruto, however, Gaara and Kankuro had reached the same conclusion. Gaara had to train as hard as he could to get the remaining tailed beasts to bring peace to the world, and as their bodies healed, they began to train. All the while, they both requested of their specific Kages to keep tabs on where the enemy Jinchuriki was. They needed to find them as quickly as possible to end the war. This drive and determination made Rasa and Hiruzen proud of their Jinchuriki. As time passed, though, neither of them seemed to be making any appearances on the battlefield, as they were both waiting for the other. It was then that Rasa decided that they needed to draw the Leaf's Jinchuriki out. To do so, they would need to use Gaara to attack an important military target. If they did that, there was no doubt Konoha would send their Jinchuriki to fight. The war was coming to a head. It was boiling down to a contest of champions, with the fate of the world at stake. There was farming land close to the Land of Wind, south of the village and close to the Land of Rivers. It had, in times past, been called the breadbasket of the Land of Fire. Rasa knew that this was where their attacks should take place. To lure out Konoha's Jinchuriki, and if not, to destroy the food supply on the front lines, which should cause Konoha to pull back a bit, and possibly give the Suna-Iwa coalition the blitzing power required to pierce through their lines into the village hidden in leaves itself. And so, that was what Rasa did. He began pooling resources during the off-seasons of winter, in which both Konoha and Suna were too tired and cold to fight furiously. And as the warm seasons began to come around again, Rasa threw everything he had at that little farming village. Naruto remembered where he was when he was informed, sleeping in bed. It was at about 8 a.m. and he was sleeping in from a long night out. There was a beating at his door. He opened his eyes thinking it was all in his dream, and he tried going back to sleep until he heard jangling keys and the opening of his latch. Not long after, a pair of hands grabbed him by the arms and pulled him out of bed. It was Kakashi Hatake. Naruto was halfway ready to fight. Yamato was here as well, rifling through his closets. Get him some pants, Kakashi said. Yamato found a pair, threw them on Naruto, and then grabbed a sleeveless hoodie and threw it on him as well. What's going on? Naruto asked as he was dressed against his will. Kakashi then spoke. We need you immediately at the Hokage's office. There's no time to waste. Suna has launched a heavy attack on the village of Rice. They've sent their Jinchuriki. They're destroying our supplies. Naruto then stood. Why didn't you just say so? Get out of the way! Naruto rushed and grabbed his shinobi gear and put on his sandals. He began running out the door and headed for the Hokage's residence. Kakashi and Yamato jumped out of the window and landed on the ground nearby. They rushed to follow after him. They made it to the Hokage's office. Hiruzen was in the middle of a war meeting with various Tokubetsu Jonin. They were all gathered around a table with a map. Sir, he's here, Yamato announced. Hiruzen walked over to Naruto and put his hands on his shoulders. "I'm glad you're here, Naruto. The moment you've been training for has arrived," Hiruzen said. He showed him the map. "As you can see, our food supply has been attacked by Suna's forces. If they seize this village, the war will turn in their favor, and they know that. This, for all intents and purposes, will be the last major battle of the war. We need to push them back. If we can capture their tailed beasts and seal them into you, the war will end, and we will be victors." Naruto nodded. "When do I leave?" Hiruzen's face was serious as he spoke. "You will leave now. We already have gear ready. Use it to your advantage and end this conflict." Naruto nodded. "Yes, sir." Naruto had been led to the front lines. He could see the battle in the distance. The One Tail was active currently, but it was obvious that the 4, 5, 7, and Yin 9 would not be far behind. As Naruto would call out to the power of his Yang Nine Tails, he would rush into battle against it. As the Yang Nine Tails clashed with the One Tail, Naruto stood there. "Where are you, Jinchuriki?" he cried out. Suddenly, coming out of the sand that made up Shukaku's forehead, Gaara appeared. He seemed shocked. "Naruto?" Naruto's eyes widened in disbelief. "Gaara!" Gaara stood there. "Wait. You're the Jinchuriki of Konoha?" Naruto looked down, examining Kurama under his feet. "Yeah." His gaze turned to Shukaku. "You're the Jinchuriki of Suna." Gaara nodded. "So, wait. I wanted to end this war so that I could visit my friend again." "Don't tell me that I have to kill my friend just to end this war." Gaara stood there. "To end this war, we need to take the tailed beasts from the other. That will mean death," Gaara said. For a while, Naruto just stood there, unable to understand why it had to be this way. Why was he forced to kill his friend? Naruto then came up with a great idea. "Gaara, let's just not fight. Let's tell our Kages that we won't fight anymore. Then they'll have no choice but to sign a treaty." Gaara shook his head. "I can't. My father's the Kazekage. I can't disobey him. And even if we didn't fight, the rest of the villages still would. And given that the villages that your side have taken don't like Konoha, you would be at a disadvantage. If you chose not to fight, it would be the end of your village, with or without my help." Naruto stood there. "What are you saying?" Gaara took a deep breath and let it out as his somber expression turned down toward the beast he was riding. "We have to fight." Gaara looked up and smiled. "Whether you kill me or not, I will always be your friend, Naruto. You know what you have to do." "But I don't know if I have the strength to, Gaara. I can't kill you, you're my friend." Gaara smiled. "And that means the world to me, Naruto. But the war's end rests solely upon our shoulders. I want Suna to win, and you want Konoha to win. We may be at war, and we may be enemies, but that doesn't mean I don't care about you, Naruto. This is just the way the war has pushed us to be." "I don't think I can kill you, Gaara," Naruto said. A tear formed in Gaara's eye. "You'll have to, because I have to kill you." Suddenly, Gaara jumped from Shukaku's head to Kurama's to engage in taijutsu with Naruto. Naruto defended himself. "Gaara, stop!" Gaara kept pushing. "Kill me, Naruto. It's the only way you can save your village. It's the only way to safeguard the people and fulfill your duty. Kill me. I won't hesitate to kill you." Gaara suddenly pulled a kunai and began thrusting it at Naruto. Naruto blocked with a kunai of his own. He would weave hand signs and cast a water-style jutsu in the form of a toxic gas bubble that began to go toward Gaara. Gaara used Chome to absorb some of the toxic gas and produce a powder that could serve as a cure to it. Gaara would then weave hand signs and begin to use boil release to send a wave of hot steam at Naruto. Naruto felt himself being burned by it. He jumped back and slid down Kurama's back. "Gaara!" Naruto cried. Gaara spawned the wings of Chome on his back and began to fly through the air. Naruto, calling on the powers of Gyuki, would raise his index and middle fingers to his open mouth and form a tailed beast ball. When it had reached maximum strength, Naruto pushed the ball into his mouth and bit down on it before releasing it from his mouth as a single powerful blast, which caused Naruto to be pushed back. The blast missed Gaara's true body but nicked his wings, causing him to drop to the ground. Gaara would then cast a ninjutsu that would turn the ground to lava and would send a wave of magma toward Naruto. Naruto would use Isobu's space-time ninjutsu to teleport away from the location of the attack and behind Gaara. The attack did scorch one of Kurama's tails, causing him to cry out. Shukaku would then be able to take this moment of shattered attention to knock Kurama back. Kurama hit the ground so hard that Naruto and Gaara were both launched at least 3 feet into the air before coming back down. Naruto would create ink clones of himself, as Gaara would attempt to destroy them by controlling the sand in his gourd via magnet release. Gaara's sand shield would manage to defend him from most of these attacks. Gaara rushed forward, his fingers coated in chakra. He attempted to plant his fingers into the now exposed seal on Naruto's abdomen. Naruto had laced his own fingers with chakra. The two collided. Gaara's fingers stopped just short of Naruto's seal. Naruto's hand caught it. Gaara wasn't so lucky. Naruto's fingers connected with Gaara's chest. Suddenly, Gaara's whole body was covered in seal-like markings. He sat there for a moment as he felt the seal shattering. He lowered his hand and let off a smile. "That's the way, Naruto. That's the way." Tears were running down Naruto's cheek. "It's not too late, Gaara. I don't have to do this." Gaara looked up at Naruto with a smile. We both know that's not true. Naruto's lip was quivering. He took in a shaky breath as he tried to speak, his voice concealed with the squeak of emotion. I trained all those years just so I could see you again, not so I could kill you. Gaara swallowed a little as he also felt himself coming close to crying, but he shook it. I know, Naruto, but this is how it had to be. From the day we were both born, our fates were sealed. We were doomed to be facing each other in battle. Naruto shook his head. Why did it have to be this way? I just wanted to have a friend. I wanted to be your friend. Gaara laughed. You were, Naruto, and you always will be. But now, one of us has to die to stop this war, and to keep hundreds of thousands from dying and suffering, and it seems the one to survive will be you. Tears were rushing down his face now. Gaara, I don't want to do this. Gaara put his hand on Naruto's, strengthening it with his own chakra. I know you don't want to, but you have to. It's your duty, just as this is mine. Gaara forced Naruto's hand to pull back. Suddenly, all the tailed beasts within Gaara came rushing out, and Shukaku and Kurama were pulled into him. As this happened, various truth-seeking orbs appeared around Naruto as he developed what almost looked like a white chakra cloak and the shadow of rabbit ears. These things dissipated, and Naruto returned back to his base form. Gaara smiled at Naruto. That cloak suits you. Gaara fell back. Naruto stood there silently for a moment, trying to process what was happening. The tears returned. He knelt down and lifted Gaara up. Gaara! Gaara! He checked his pulse, and there was none. His heart had stopped. His chakra was gone. Gaara was dead. Naruto began to wail. He began to cry. The Suna Nin drew closer, as did the Konoha Nin. They watched this curious scene, a Konoha Nin crying over the death of a Suna Nin. Why? Why would someone cry over the death of their enemy? It made no sense. Or maybe it did, and they had simply forgotten. Naruto would be hailed as a hero in Konoha for what he had done. Hiruzen would be able to force the Suna-Iwa coalition into surrender, and as the war came to a close, Hiruzen returned autonomy to the villages he had taken. After all, their greatest weapons had been stripped of them, and now Konoha held all of the power. Despite this, Naruto did not feel pleased. After all, he had lost his friend and his heart was filled with pain. No matter how sweet the victory, the bitterness of loss would always stain it. But Naruto had made a vow to himself that so long as he lived and possessed these powers, he would ensure that war would never again threaten the world and force brothers to fight. And that he did. For as long as Naruto lived, peace remained. And that's where I think our story should come to a close. It's sad about the death of Gaara, but the world finally knew peace. That is the tragedy of war, that brothers are forced to fight one another. In the end, while war is a natural state for mankind, it won't always be this way. I believe that one day peace will reign, and war will become a thing of the past. And I pray for the speedy coming of that day, where all men and women can live in peace together, surrounded by love, kindness, and goodwill to all. Thank you for watching. Let us know in the comments what your favorite part of the video was and what you'd like to see in the future. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell to be notified when more videos like this drop. And while you wait, check out these other videos. Until next time, peace.